ॐ भूर्भुवः स्वः तत्सवितुर्वरेण्यं भर्गो देवस्य धीमहि धियो यो नः प्रचोदयात् ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्ति. Sai Ram, dear sisters and brothers, I am giving you another video on Sai Baba Gita. That is my ninth video. This book is divided into three parts. First part is path of devotion, second is path of wisdom, and third is path of action. So I have given 8 videos on the first part, path of devotion. Now I am starting with the first video on path of wisdom. Okay, so it starts with the heading give up self delusion, know your real self. That means forget about the Maya, all about the world, and know thyself, your reality. Now, Krishna admonished Arjuna give up this faint heartedness, pluck your courage and fight. This weakness of heart that has overtaken you is not becoming of a great hero. Embodiments of love. What was responsible for Arjuna's despondency? It was ignorance. Because of ignorance, he developed body consciousness, and because of body consciousness, he became confused and weak minded. He lost all his resolve and courage and was unable to accomplish anything. Infatuation and attachment lead to sorrow. Krishna told Arjuna, as long as you are weak minded, even the smallest task will not get done. You will be haunted by sorrow. Do you know what causes this sorrow? It is your attachment. You are infatuated with a sense of my people, my kinsmen, my friends. This possessive attitude stems from ignorance. Attachment and infatuation will always make you faint hearted and plunge you into grief. These are the real enemies you must battle and conquer. As long as you are swayed by this possessive attitude, thinking only of yourself, your family, your people, your things, you can be certain that sooner or later you will be cast into sorrow. You must shift your focus away from your little self and its concerns for me and mine. Align yourself with the will of the divine. Travel from selfishness to selflessness, from bondage to liberation. More than ever, the teaching is applicable today. For example, think of the time when the school photographer came to take pictures of all the students in your class. When the photos came back from the lab, more than likely you were interested in finding your own photo. You were not as interested in the other's photo. Of course, when your father came home from a long trip and brought with him presents for every child in the family, you were probably most eager to find out what he had brought for you. These are examples of a widespread selfishness which is prevalent everywhere, but you should leave this kind of narrowness behind and become broad minded and selfless. Then you will be a fit instrument in the hands of the divinity and contribute to the welfare of the whole world. Infatuation will destroy your courage and will. Before the great war referred to in the Gita, Arjuna had participated in a number of battles, but never before had he been overcome by despondency and attachment. Now, the same Arjuna was overwhelmed with grief when he realized that the opponents he had to fight were his own grandfather, his kinsman, and his teacher. This possessive feeling made him feel dejected. He became a victim of infatuation. The feeling of minus had crept in. As this attitude grew, its consequence, which is sorrow, also grew along with it. Previously, when Krishna went on his peace mission to the opposing side, Arjuna discouraged it. He used immediate war. He tried to convince Krishna that the mission would fail, that talk would prove futile, and only a victorious war could restore to them the kingdom which had been stolen from Arjuna and his brother. At that time, Arjuna told Krishna, this struggle for right cannot be settled by peaceful means. Our enemies will never agree to the terms of your peace mission. Their hatred and greed is unappeasable. Why waste your time and efforts on them? Good and evil cannot coexist. They are incompatible. They will never join together. Your mission is bound to fail. Then Arjuna was full of courage and determination because he was not seeing his grandfather, his teacher, his relatives, and many of his friends facing him on the opposing side. Before this possessive vision emerged on the eve of the war, it seemed that Arjuna had a very broad vision. But now, standing in the middle of the battlefield, Arjuna's vision was beclouded. His eyes became dim, his heart was heavy, and his mind confused when he saw his close relatives and some of his friends arrayed on the other side ready to fight him. He felt dizzy. He said, Krishna, I will not fight. Remember that Arjuna was about to fight a war to protect righteousness, a war for which he had been preparing for many years. He was already on the battlefield and the war was about to commence. Was that the time to look upon his opponents as relatives? When Krishna heard Arjuna's words, he got very angry. He told Arjuna, this is faint-heartedness. It does not become you. A fearless person like you who has always walked proudly with his head held high like a true hero now seems to be suffering from timidity. A person who suffers from such faint-heartedness cannot be my disciple. The war is about to start. The final preparations for war have been going on for the past 3 months, and now the battle plans have been set. If you had shown this kind of hesitation in the beginning, I would surely not have taken on this task of driving your chariot. At this late stage, you are hesitating after you have convinced friends and relatives of the rightness of your cause and have persuaded them to join your side. Now, with them all assembled here, you are laying down your weapons and giving up ignominiously. Is that the way for a hero to act? You are destroying the true spirit of your royal line, whose sworn duty is to protect honor and righteousness. If you continue in this way as a timid, faint-hearted weakling, the coming generations will laugh at your cowardice. You have taken the name of Arjuna, but you are not living up to that name. Ignorance is the cause of all sorrow. What is the meaning of Arjuna? It means sacredness and purity. For such a noble person as Arjuna to lay down his arms and resolve not to fight a battle in which righteousness was at stake could only be due to ignorance. The Lord, being fully aware of the nature of this disease, resolved to eradicate it. At the very beginning of the Gita, Krishna could have taught the principle of devotion and the commitment to duty and selfless action, but Krishna chose not to do so. In fact, he started speak only after listening for a long time to Arjuna's weeping and lamentations. While Arjuna was carrying on, Krishna did not interfere at all. He patiently waited while Arjuna verbalized his confused state. Finally, Krishna asked Arjuna, are you done? Have you vented all your feeling? It was only at this point that Krishna started teaching. Just as students become empty after writing their examinations, Arjuna also became empty after airing all his concerns. Then Krishna told him, this awful defect of weak mindedness has sprouted in you. I know how to deal with it. I will cure it. It is ignorance which is responsible for this infatuation. This ignorance is causing your weak mindedness. Then Krishna started instructing Arjuna in the highest wisdom, the knowledge which distinguishes the true self from the false self, the eternal from the ephemeral, the sentient from the insentient. When a person is overcome with anguish and is suffering from ignorance, what should be done to free him from his delusion? He is like a patient who is in great danger. The first thing the doctor must do is to see to it that the patient gets out of danger. After that, the doctor can undertake longer term treatment. Suppose the patient is in immediate danger of losing his life, then any treatments the patient is giving will prove to be useless unless he is first brought out of the emergency. Once he is out of danger, then many thero- therapeutic procedures can be undertaken. For example, if a person is drowning in a river, you must first bring him out of the water, lie him down on the bank, and giving him artificial respiration. Then you can start your other treatments to bring up his circulation and getting over the shock. You certainly would not start those treatments while he is in water drowning. The cure for ignorance. Krishna therefore gave Arjuna a strong injection of courage to save him from drowning in sorrow and dejection. His immediate first aid treatment was to teach Arjuna how to discriminate between the true self and the personal self. He said, Arjuna, as long as you are overcome with fear and anxiety, you will not be able to accomplish anything. Be courageous. Know that you are the Atma, not this body. Then you will be fearless. I can help you to achieve great things, but only if you base your actions on true knowledge and remain fearless. At this point, Krishna was smiling, but Arjuna was weeping. The only one, the only one who is always smiling is the Lord. The one who is weeping is man. Krishna is true self. Arjuna is the false self. One is the embodiment of wisdom and the other is filled with ignorance. Krishna said, I would like to explain some things to you which are very important. Right now we are behaving in different ways. I'm smiling while you are crying, but we would both be alike. Either I could become like you or you could become like me. If I should become like you, then I would become weak minded, but that is impossible. Weakness can never enter into me. On the other hand, if you were to become like me, then you would have to follow me and do as I say. At this, Arjuna replied, Swami, I will do exactly as you say. I will follow all your commands implicitly. Having given Arjuna sufficient encouragement and strength of purpose, Krishna enabled Arjuna to recover his strong resolve. From that point on, Arjuna undertook to fight following the directions given by the Lord. Krishna started his wisdom teachings with some important truths relating to the body and mind. He said, Arjuna, you think that these people are your relatives and friends, but what is meant by a relative or a friend? Does it refer to the body or does it refer to the indweller? Bodies are just water bubbles, they come and go. These relatives and friends which you are so attached to have all existed before in any number of times. But were they your relatives and friends then? No. You too have existed countless times before, and I as well. The body, the mind, and the intellect are all just so much apparel. They are like the clothes you wear. You change them now and again. They are mere instruments. Why dwell pay close relationship with these things, getting infatuated with them, and then having to suffer so much sorrow and grief? Do your duty. All the honor that is due to you as a prince will be bestowed on you, but on the battlefield there cannot be room for any feeling of mindedness and heartness. Fighting boldly to preserve righteousness and shrinking in weakness are completely incompatible with each other. To have this timidity on the battlefield is not becoming of a great hero. Your cause is just and you have come to fight, therefore fight with words such as these. Krishna cured Arjuna of his despondency and helped him to find his strength and courage. When Krishna finished his teaching on the battlefield, Arjuna regained his noble ideals and faced the upcoming fight with renewed valor. The war between selfishness and selflessness. This particular field on which the war was about to be fought had historically been a sacred place where sacrifices and other sacred and auspicious acts had been performed. At the same time, it was also the place where the dynasty that sprouted the 100 wicked brothers had engaged in its nefarious activities. Therefore, this field was both sacred and corrupted by evil. This field is symbolic of the human body. When a body is born, it is pure and unblemished. It is not a victim of any of the six enemies of man: desire, anger, greed, infatuation, pride, and jealousy. A newborn baby is naturally joyful. Whoever may look at it, whether that person is a thief or a king, the baby is happy. It smiles and laughs at anyone who comes towards it, whether that person has come to kiss it or beat it. Since a small child is pure, its body can be described as the field of righteousness. As the body grows, it goes on collecting bad qualities such as jealousy, hatred, attachment, greed, selfishness. As these evil traits accumulate, the body becomes impure. Therefore, the body can be considered both pure and impure, good and bad. Both are encased your heart. The impure qualities are associated with minus the possessive tendency. The inner significance of this battle between the forces of good and evil, with the five Pandavas brothers and Krishna on one side and the 100 wicked Kaurava brothers on the other side, is the inner war taking place in each individual, an all-out war between good and bad, between righteousness and immorality, between selflessness and selfishness. The Kaurava brothers represent those people who consider things which do not belong to them as their own. They represent the possessive nature. They consider the body as their very self. If you observe people of the Kaurava mentality, that is, those having this possessive attitude, you will find that they all identify themselves with the body and the senses. The great war between the Pandavas and the Kauravas lasted only 18 days, but the war between the forces of good and evil goes on throughout your life. It has no end. This battle is fought in the field of your own body. In this way, Krishna explained some of the deeper significance of the war to Arjuna. Foresight and compassion, qualities found in a pure heart. You might wonder why the Gita was taught to Arjuna among the Pandavas. Some of the other brothers, such as the oldest one, Dharmraja, who was the very pillar of virtue, might be considered better qualified spiritually than Arjuna. Why was the sacred Gita not taught to Dharmraja, who was known for his outstanding moral strength? Or if you were to consider physical prowess, then Bhima, who was the most powerful among the brothers, would surely have qualified for the teaching. Krishna could have given the Gita to Bhima, but he did not. Why not? Why did he give it only to Arjuna? You have to understand the inner significance of this. Dharmaraja was the embodiment of righteousness, but he did not have foresight. He did not think about the future consequences of his actions. Only after events had already occurred did he think about their consequences and feel sorry for what he had done. He had hindsight but not foresight. If you take Bhima, he of course had great physical strength, but he did not have much intelligence. He was able to uproot a tree, but he was lacking in discrimination. Arjuna, on the other hand, had foresight. For example, Arjuna told Krishna, I would rather be dead than fight against these people. It will mean so much suffering later on, even if we win the war. In contrast to Arjuna's anguish about all the suffering that would be brought on by this war, Dharmaraja was quite ready to get on with the battle, although later he felt deeply depressed about all the killing when the war was over. Years earlier, Dharmaraja had been pulled into a royal game of dice in which he lost everything, including his wealth, his kingdom, and even his wife. Afterwards, he was filled with great anguish and remorse. Whenever a person without discrimination and foresight is called upon to make a decision while in the midst of difficult circumstances, he invariably regret his actions later on. This was also the nature of King Dasharatha, who was the father of Rama, the divine incarnation 5,000 years earlier. King Dasharatha lacked foresight and discrimination. Early in his reign, Dasharatha had to fight a war to defend and preserve righteousness. In this war, he took his young queen Kaikeyi with him. Kaikeyi had been a princess in a warrior kingdom and had been well schooled in the art of warfare. It was Kaikeyi, in fact, who taught Rama archery and some of the methods of waging war. When Dasharatha was fighting during the war, one of the wheels of his chariot started coming off. Kaikeyi used her finger to keep the wheel from separating itself from the axle. In so doing, she saved Dasharatha's life as well as her own. After having achieved victory, King Dasharatha noticed that her hand was bleeding profusely. Seeing her plight, he was so overwhelmed with infatuation and so pleased with her courage and sacrifice that he told her, Kaikeyi, you can ask for two boons. Ask for anything that you wish, and I shall do all in my power to grant them to you. He granted the boons in gratitude for her heroic act in saving their lives, but his infatuation with her blinded him to her weak mindedness. He did not specify what kind of boons she could ask for, nor when they should ask a fact. He blindly granted the promise of boons without thinking of any of the possible consequences. Kekai waited until the time when Dasharatha decided to hand over the kingdom to Rama. At that point, Kekai asked for Rama to be banished to the forest and for her son Bharata to be put on the throne. Instead, then Dasharatha felt desperately sorry for having granted the boons without any preconditions, but it was too late to retreat them, and the resulting grief brought on his death. We know that Krishna had a great deal of affection for Arjuna, but is that the reason he taught the Gita to Arjuna and not to one of the other brother? No, Krishna looked at all the consequences, all the implications, and found Arjuna alone qualified to receive the Gita from him. Arjuna foresaw what was going to happen after the war and therefore declared that he did not want to fight because the consequences would be very bad. He was not feeling sorry after the war was over, but before. That attitude of feeling sorry before taking action instead of afterwards can only be found in a pure heart. Arjuna certainly had such a pure and sacred heart, and that's why Krishna was so fond of him. The transformation from kinsman or friend to disciple. In those days, people lived much longer than who they do today. At the time of the Great War, Krishna and Arjuna were already quite advanced in years by today's standards. For over 70 years, Krishna and Arjuna had been inseparably together. Although they were together for so many years, at no time during all those years did Krishna teach the Gita to Arjuna. Why was this so? During all those years, Arjuna treated Krishna as his brother-in-law and his close friend. Krishna did not teach the Gita to Arjuna as long as Arjuna was living with body consciousness. The moment Arjuna surrendered and accepted discipleship, then Krishna became his teacher and Arjuna became Krishna's student. Only after this act of surrender on the part of Arjuna did Krishna teach him the Gita. This means that if you really want to acquire spiritual knowledge from another, you have to relate to that person as a disciple to spiritual teacher before the transfer of knowledge can flow freely. In the ancient scriptures, there is a similar story of a great teacher. At that time, there was no greater teacher than he, but he sent his own son to another teacher to attain spiritual knowledge. The father himself would not teach his son. He took this step because he knew that as long as the son considered him the father, the boy would not relate to him fully as the teacher, and therefore the boy would not have been properly instructed in the highest wisdom. This was also the situation with Krishna and Arjuna. As long as the relationship of brother-in-law existed between them, Arjuna could not receive knowledge from Krishna. But once this feeling of brother-in-law left his heart and the feeling of being in the presence of supreme divinity entered Arjuna's heart, then Arjuna was able to learn from Krishna. After Arjuna had surrendered completely and developed the feeling that Krishna was divine, he said to Krishna, you are my mother, you are my father, you are my nearest kin, you are my dearest friend, you are my wisdom, you are my treasure, you are my everything, you are my Lord, my loving Lord. It was then that Krishna accepted him as a disciple. At that point, Krishna said, you do my work, do everything for me, and I shall take care of you. The most important thing that Krishna did was to free Arjuna from the feeling of body consciousness. So long as the body consciousness persists, regardless of what path you follow, whether it is the path of selfless service or the path of devotion or the path of inner inquiry, you will not be able to practice the required disciplines that, that will lead you to the goal. Body consciousness and the attachments resulting from it will constantly pollute your heart. Without emptying the heart of its dross, it is not possible to fill it up and sacred feelings. If a tumbler is full of water, how can you fill it with milk? You first have to empty the water. Krishna said, Arjuna, you are full of body consciousness. First, you must completely rid yourself of this. Only then will I be able to fill your heart with sacred thoughts. Be courageous, be fearless, be discriminating. Krishna's teachings were aimed at freeing Arjuna of his infatuations and the grief and sorrow which resulted from them. The two most important steps in this process are surrender and elimination of body consciousness. Once Arjuna's body consciousness was gone, Krishna was ready to reveal to Arjuna the highest spiritual teaching, that of self-knowledge. With that, Krishna awakened Arjuna out of his sleep of ignorance. He said, there are a number of reasons for your sorrow, but the most fundamental one is your ignorance. You have been unaware of your true nature and therefore you have become overwhelmed with grief. But now you have cried out for God. You have cried out for righteousness. You have cried out for me. When you cry for me, I will take care of you and give you everything you need. You all cry for so many different things, but do you cry out for God? Do you shed tears when there is a decline of righteousness? When you do, the Lord will establish Himself in your heart, teach you His highest wisdom, and make you an instrument in His mission. For this, you must have courage and inner strength, Krishna told Arjuna. You should never have any kind of weak heartedness. It is only after you remove such weakness from your heart that the divine power will enter and reside in your heart. If you do not have courage, even sheep will frighten you, not to speak of evil minded man. You must have the capacity to face all circumstances. If you run away in fear, even monkeys will attack you. But if you have a stick and stand your ground, the monkeys will not come near you. Whatever the circumstances, face it squarely and do not show your back. Then will you be able to achieve what you set out to do. The essence of this teaching is be courageous, be fearless. Courage is the primary instrument for achieving any kind of success. You need to have more courage and more determination, but you should not have blind and foolish courage. Courage must be accompanied by discrimination, only then will success be assured. Banish the ignorance and sorrow will leave you forever. To gain wisdom, you need to undertake the practice of inner inquiry. In this practice, you dissociate yourself completely from your mind and your thoughts. It is identification with the mind and its impurities that causes bondage. In this connection, Krishna told Arjuna, timidity, grief, sorrow, all these weaknesses and fears that you are experiencing are associated with the mind. What is the reason for this sorry state you find yourself in? It is the impurities in your mind, Arjuna. You have identified yourself with this impure mind, and as a result, you are suffering. Embodiments of love. The first thing Krishna did when he started speaking was to diagnose Arjuna's malady. Arjuna was suffering from ignorance. He was ignorant of his own true nature and the true nature of everyone else. Because of this ignorance, Arjuna came under the spell of delusion and duality. He had fallen prey to the impurities in his mind. He felt the anxiety of separation. As a result, he became despondent. He was overcome with grief and sorrow. The cure for this disease of ignorance is wisdom. Therefore, Krishna started his teachings by expounding on the path of wisdom. Your true nature is eternal joy. Life may be thought of as a flow where different energies, feeling, or states of being come together and then separate again. These are moments of transition when a particular ephemeral quality changes to its opposite or when a particular time period changes to another. For example, the junction between night and day, between sleep and waking, or between health and illness are times of transition. The coming together of happiness and sorrow is also such a time. At the very moment of transition, you are neither happy nor sad. At the time when you transition from one feeling to another, your mind is in equipoise and you are not bound by either emotion, but you do not remain there for long. Soon you move into the opposite quality. You feel happiness or fall into sorrow, and you come under the sway of that feeling. Of course, you aspire only for happiness and not for sorrow, but to permanently achieve that, you must transcend all these temporary feelings. When you become aware of the transitions, you realize that your unchanging truth is neither of the opposites which you cycle between in life. The path of wisdom reveals to you your essence, which is eternal joy. Your true nature transcends all these temporary joys and sorrows. When you are identified with your eternal self, You are not be affected by the pairs of opposites. The path of wisdom teaches the way to eternal joy through the practice of detachment and discrimination. This practice must be based on unwavering love for the divinity present everywhere. The body is the outer garment that you as pure spirit wear. In the Gita, you will find reference to the master of the sense organs and to the one who has acquired control over his sense organs. Krishna was the master of the senses and Arjuna had gained control over the senses. But at the beginning, Arjuna was steeped in body consciousness and was not in control at all. Arjuna began worrying after he started thinking about the future consequences of the forthcoming battle with his relatives and friends. He was deeply concerned with what might happen following the destruction of these people. In other words, Arjuna was thinking only in terms of body consciousness. The body can be thought of as a vessel or a container or apparel which the individual soul puts on, just as it is natural to throw away a dirty or a worn out article of clothing and wear a new one. In the same way, you also give up this body and put on a new one. Krishna showed that death was very much like getting rid of an old piece of cloth. When ordinary people hear that the body can be thought of as a dress that you put on and take off, they get some doubts. After 80 or 90 years, when old age has had its effect, one can easily accept that the body has become like a worn out cloth. Then one would agree that these old clothes should be left behind. But if a person dies during youth or manhood before old age has set in, it would amount to leaving new clothes behind. Suppose a body of 20 years is left behind, how can it be called an old worn out cloth? That is obviously a new cloth. Krishna answered this doubt with an example. Suppose you had gone on a pilgrimage 1 year and while there you had purchased a piece of cloth. You brought the cloth home and kept it in a closet. Then after 5 or 10 years, while putting some clothes in storage, you came across this piece of cloth and remembered that you had brought it many years earlier. You took this cloth to a tailor and got a shirt made. One day, while wearing this shirt, you bent over to sit down and the back of the shirt tore. You thought it was a new shirt, but how quickly it had become torn. Why did it last only for such a short time? It tore because the piece of cloth was old. The shirt was new, but the cloth came from old stock. Wearing a body and spending only a little bit of time in it may appear on the surface as if you are discarding a new body, but actually it is of old stock. It has come to you from many past births. Here is another example that will help you to understand this. There are two individuals, a young person and an old one. The young man who is 18 years old has been striking a stone repeatedly, giving it 20 powerful blows with a hammer, but it does not break. He sits down to rest. Then an elderly person comes along and with only two strokes of the hammer breaks the stone. What is the reason for this surprising result where the stone did not break after 20 strokes given by the strong young person but was quickly broken by a feeble individual of 80 years of age who gave it only two strokes? The mistakes in thinking is to count only the two strokes given by the old man, believing that the stone had given way after the impact of those two strokes. But in truth, it gave way after 22 strokes. After the 20 strokes given by the young man, it was given an additional two strokes by the elderly person. Then it broke. This body is only one of many you have worn. Similarly, you have many You may have done a number of spiritual practices and enjoyed a variety of spiritual experiences in a previous birth, after which you gave up your life. Now, in this life, you resume your spiritual journey, and even before you attain old age, you may gain spiritual fulfillment. In thinking about this kind of thing, you may be taking only the present life into account, considering only the efforts and consequences of the actions of this, but in the eyes of the Lord, all your past lives, all your past efforts and past consequences are considered. Krishna said, dear child, in the end, each body is destroyed by time. Know that you have existed in countless bodies and have gone through countless cycles of births and deaths for ages past, as far back as anyone can count. The very meaning of the word for body in Sanskrit is that which wears out. It is born as a lump of flesh. During its growth, it becomes a beautiful, attractive body. But then ultimately it becomes old and loses its strength and attractiveness. The body is an inert, insentient thing. During a lifetime, it undergoes a number of changes and then eventually gets worn out. But now, you may have a doubt, how can the body be called inert and insentient? It is talking, it is walking, it is living, it sees, it hears, it feels, it experiences pain, it is full of activities. This living body cannot be called inert, but once you find the mechanism of a watch, it also starts working and moving. From that moment on, the hands of the watch will be going round and the bell will be chiming every hour. But that is not sufficient reason to say that the watch is alive because of the power it got when you wound it. This watch functions properly in the same way, because of the life energy given by God, your body talks and performs various functions. Without the divine principle animating it, the body cannot function, just as the watch cannot function without being wound. But now another question arises. A watch is working, but it does not change its form and size, whereas a body will be growing. How can you account for this? If it is merely an inert thing, how can it grow? Inert things do not grow, but if you sweep the floor and collect the dust and put it in a dustbin, even that heap will grow. When you go on feeding this body with all sorts of food, this body also grows. As the food heaps up inside, the body grows. A heap of dust may grow, but you cannot say that it has life. Similarly, just because you find your body growing, you cannot infer that it is alive. The body itself is just an inert thing, but it is full of consciousness because its very basis is divinity. Always remember that basis. It is this divine consciousness that supports and activates the living principle of all living beings. Ignorance is being unaware of your true nature. When Krishna called Arjuna ignorant, did it mean that Arjuna had no education? No. It did not mean that at all. Arjuna had mastered a great number of skills. He was well trained in the martial arts, in the art of administration, and many other professional skills. But in the field of spirituality, he had no knowledge. Here he exhibited real ignorance. People use their capacities and faculties to specialize in one particular field and develop a profi- proficiency in it. Some people use their faculties for mastering music, others write poetry, others develop skills in painting and sculpture. Among scientists, one person will achieve in biology in that way. They may be made extraordinary contributions each in his own particular area, but they do not know much about other areas of knowledge. The only one who has complete mastery and proficiency in all areas is God. That's why he has been described as omniscient. One who is omniscient is also omnipotent and all pervading. Only God has these three qualities: omniscience, omnipotence, and omnipresence. Knowing the past, present, and future, and knowing what Arjuna was ready, Krishna undertook to teach Arjuna the greatest spiritual truths. He told Arjuna, recognize the ephemeral nature of the body and never forget its unchanging basis. With that divine basis as your focus, discharge your duties. To begin with, you must get rid of all your attachments. You are overwhelmed by attachment to the body. This attachment is very dangerous. It will destroy all your powers of discrimination. There is a small story to illustrate this. The danger of being attached to the body. Once upon a time, Indra, the lord of the celestials, was cursed to be born as a pig on earth. Being born thus, he was spending all his time living a family life in dirty, muddy water. The sage Narada, while passing by and seeing this pig and its family, recognized Indra reduced to that lowly form. Narada, who loved Indra dearly, took great pity on him. Narada spoke to the pig, Indra, look at what a state you have degenerated into. How did this happen? How could you, a great deity with unlimited power, the Lord of all the heavenly regions, have come to this? But never mind, don't worry, I will get you out. I will use all my accumulated powers of penance to help you. He spoke to him very sympathetically, lamenting that one who should be enjoying all the luxuries of heaven had been put into such a miserable state. How very unfortunate Indra's life had become, Narada thought. But Indra, in the form of pig, replied, Narada, why are you coming in the way of my happiness? The joy that I am getting in this dirty water, I will not be able to get anywhere else. The wonderful life that I am enjoying here with my wife and children in this mud hole, I cannot even get in heaven. Why have you come here to meddle with my life and get in the way of my joy? Please go your way and leave me be. Indra, who was under the spell of the illusion of attachment, did not realize his pitiful condition. Narada had to summon Indra's own weapon, the celestial thunderbolt, to render that pig body asunder and free, much relieved Indra from his prison of attachment and body consciousness. When you are under the spell of attachment, you will be completely deluded. This delusion is due to the irresistible power of Maya, which veils your truth and keeps it hidden from you. If you want to destroy this power of illusion, you must develop your knowledge of the true self. Therefore, Krishna took it upon himself to start out his teachings by instructing Arjuna in self knowledge. It is only after you have the and direct experience of your eternal self that you can truly do your work and discharge your duties properly. Without this knowledge, you will not understand even the mundane and daily activities relating to the world. Listening to spiritual teachings can help you only to a small extent. When you are listening to the Gita, you feel so happy and so full of joy. It all seems so simple, but this elation you experience is just a temporary phenomenon. When you undertake to put the teachings into practice, many real problems and difficulties arise, but you must persist in your efforts. The teachings will do you little good unless you put them into practice. Whatever you have heard and whatever you have read, you must enter into completely, make your own. Then you will gain something truly worthwhile. You must live the teaching. A great sage, while on a pilgrimage, reached a village in the south of India. In the temple of this village, a number of people had assembled. A learned teacher was expounding the teachings of the Gita. The teacher was reading the text. The disciples would repeat the verses and then teacher would give the appropriate commentaries. One particular disciple was found sitting in a corner profusely shedding tears. All the other people were holding the Gita and were repeating the lines, listening to the teacher's words very attentively. Their facial expressions would constantly change as the text was being expounded. Sometimes they would be joyful, sometimes serious, but the disciple sitting in the corner was not having any experience like that. His facial expression did not change at all. He was only shedding tears. The sage observed all this. He addressed the man and asked him, "Why are you crying when the Gita is being expounded in such a joyous way? What is the reason for your sadness?" The man replied, "Master, I do not know who you are. I do not know Sanskrit. I can't pronounce the verses. Since I do not know Sanskrit, I do not want to repeat these verses in the wrong way because I may be committing a sin that way. Therefore, I was just picturing in my own heart Krishna giving this Gita to Arjuna. There on the battlefield, Krishna was seated in the driver's seat. Arjuna was sitting behind him in the chariot. I was crying because I was imagining Krishna having to turn his head back for such a long time, trying to convince Arjuna of this great truth. Keeping his head turned like that must have given him a great deal of pain. If only Arjuna had been sitting in front and Krishna in the back, then it would not have caused so much trouble to the Lord. Thinking of that hurts me very much. The sage recognized that here was a true devotee. The man was experiencing so much love for Krishna and had immersed himself so deeply in identifying with the Lord, giving the Gita teaching to Arjuna, that he had become a part of Krishna himself. The sage concluded that experiencing such feelings was far greater than merely listening to and repeating the Gita verses. Even now, while the Gita is being expounded, some of you are writing everything down reverently in your notebooks, while some of you are holding the Gita in your hands and following the verses, trying to learn them. But these are all just outer activities which will not evoke very deep feelings of devotion. If you want your heart to become completely saturated with the essence of the teaching, you must seek the inner experience. Do this by putting the verses into practice in your daily life. Even if you practice only one of them, it will be more than enough. What is the use of taking down 100 of them if you fill your head with all the contents of the book? Your head will be just another book. What counts is what you get imprinted on the book of your heart. Even if one even if only one of these teachings is imprinted in your heart, that will be all that is needed. Let your heart become saturated with love. What is enough? Instead of filling your head with scholarship and book knowledge, it is far better to fill your heart with love. Ignorance must be completely dispelled. Krishna said to Arjuna, "There is no meaning in your grieving and lamenting, basing all your feelings in these outer bodily attachments and relationships. Go inside, let your mind become introspective, then you will be able to understand all the things that I am expounding. You are grieving for people for whom there is no need to grieve. You are making yourself miserable without reason. You should not suffer so. You are feeling all this sorrow because your heart is full of ignorance. Drive this ignorance completely out of your heart. It is only when there is not even the least vestige of ignorance left in your heart that you will be capable of understanding wisdom. Ignorance is like fire. Suppose a fire is extinguished almost completely except for just a few glowing embers. If a breeze comes up, sparks from these few coals may develop into a huge conflagration conflagration. Therefore, there should not even be a remnant of the fire left. Ignorance is also like sickness. Suppose your disease is almost cured, but there is only a small vestige of it left. If after coming home from the hospital you give up the proper diet, it may quickly develop and spread again. There should be absolutely no remnant of disease left. You can also compare ignorance to being in debt. Suppose you have discharged all your debts. There is only one small loan of $100 left, but if you let the interest accumulate, what will happen? The debt will be start piling up again. Therefore, you should discharge your debt completely in the same way. If there are any latent impressions of attachment and desire left in your heart, your sorrow is likely to flare up and grow. That's why Krishna admonished Arjuna, if you retain even the smallest trace of attachment in your heart, whatever I teach you will become useless. You must completely destroy all your attachment which has been fed up for so long by the ignorance that is be clouding your heart. To help you do this, I am teaching you the path of wisdom. The wisdom teaching is an extremely important part of the Gita. Once you understand the difference between the true self, the divine Atma, and the false self which is associated with worldly things, then all the other teachings will become very easy to understand. You have to spend a number of days in concentration trying to understand from the very core of your heart the distinction between the real and the non-real, and then detach yourself from the not real. That is the central teaching of the path of wisdom. Each word of these teachings is a rare jewel. It is only when you completely understand the nature of wisdom path that you will be able to understand Gita in full and live a free life of grief and sorrow. Master your senses and the whole world will be yours. Whatever you seek, whatever you look, whether you look for it here on earth or in the heavens or in the nether world, all that you will ever find are the five elements and only the five elements in all the worlds. There is nothing else. Whatever you have ever desired, whatever you have ever used, whatever you have ever lost, all these myri myriad of things are but varying expressions of the same five elements, embodiments of love. Everything in the universe, everything that has ever been created, everything that will ever be conceived of is being made of gross or subtle aspects of the five elements, namely space, air, fire, water, and earth. These countless variations of the five elements have been and are forever changing with time. They are all temporary, endlessly cycling from one name and form to another. The transitory nature of all things. The flower which has blossomed today will be dried tomorrow and it will be decomposed a few days later. Food that has been cooked today will be spoiled tomorrow and becomes poisonous the following day. Once it has become spoiled, you cannot get the fresh food back. The beautiful form of today will turn ugly by tomorrow. You even atoms making up the matter in the moon maybe time end up here on earth and atoms making up matter here on the earth may go to the moon. Ev- Every 7 years, all the atoms which constitute the human body undergo a total change. It would be foolish indeed for you to think that the body and the sense organs, which are made up of five elements, are permanent, or that any object made up of these elements has any lasting value. Only the senses will be hankering after such external transitory things. The Gita has shown that this impermanent complex of five elements, which we call the body, mind, and senses, consist of 24 principles. It is made up of the five gross sense organs, the ears, the skin, the eyes, the tongue, and the nose. These reach out to the sense objects through the subtle sense organs comprising sound, touch, sight, taste, and smell. These gross and subtle senses are inextricably related. Without the subtle, the gross cannot function. For example, you may have eyes but no sight. You may have ears but no hearing. You may have a tongue but no taste. The 24 impermanent principles. In addition to the gross and the subtle senses, there are also the five life energies which vitalize all bodily functions. One of these is related to breathing, another to elimination, a third to circulation, the fourth to digestion, and the fifth to the upward flow which energize the higher centers. Beside the 15 principles enumerated above, there are the four faculties comprising the inner instrument. This inner instrument is made up of all the different aspects of what we know as mind. It consists of the thinking faculty which analyzes and reacts, the intuitive faculty also known as buddhi, which knows the deeper purpose of life and discriminates between the real and the unreal, the subjective individual expression or ego self which is associated with the personality, and the reservoir of feelings and memory wherein the effects of past actions are stored. All of these foregoings are contained within the five seats. These seats can be thought of as various bodies interpreting one another in a successively more subtle way, each one finer than the previous one. The grossest seat is the food seat, which comprises the physical body. It is made up of physical matter. Next, the first of the subtle intangible seats, it is the vital seat. It relates to the life, breath, and physical energy. Then there is the mind seat, which relates to the lower mind. The fourth seat is the intellectual seat. It is associated with the higher mind, and wherein the buddhi is the intuitive discriminating faculty is contained. These last mentioned three seats, the vital, the mind, and the intellectual, all make up the subtle body of man. Finally, there is the bliss seat, the subtlest of all bodies. It is known as the causal body. It is beyond all aspects of mind. It is the source of all mind stuff within it. Only a thin veil of ignorance remains to hide the true self, which is pure bliss. These seats are known as Annamay Kosha, Pranamay Kosha, Manomay Kosha, Vigyanamay Kosha, and Anandamay Kosha. And this way, five layers of our body, physical body, subtle body, and the causal body. The immortal self beyond the ephemeral individual. Together, these 24 principles comprise the individual being. The wisdom teachings deal with these various principles. Their purpose is to help you realize the one transcendent principle which is beyond all these. That is the Atma. It is the immortal self, the one reality that underlies all these bodily principles, but which is in no way affected by them. It is true and unchanging, whereas these 24 are just manifestations of ignorance constantly undergoing changes. Together, these 24 principles constitute the illusion which makes you appear as a separate being. If you go on spending your life depending only on these changing qualities, how will you ever be able to attain the eternal bliss, which is your true nature, and which is not in any way influenced by these transitory things? The joys that you experience through your sense organs that seem so delightful in the moment are likely to give you sorrow later on. Such joys come and go, they are not permanent. Krishna strongly emphasized that you should not believe in these sense organs and be led astray by them. However educated you may be, whatever office you may hold, whatever position you may have, unless you gain control over your senses, you will not be able to gain peace of mind. Inner peace can be obtained only by controlling the sense organs. Perhaps you think that controlling the sense organs is too difficult for you to undertake, but in Gita, Krishna taught a number of different ways which can help you succeed in mastering them. Now, at this point, I end my video, otherwise it will become too long. So, my dear Sai brothers, And sisters, please like, comment, and share these videos and subscribe my channel. Now, see, meaning is that more and more people should be benefited by the Brahma Gyan of our dear, dear, dear Lord Sathya Sai Baba. What a wonderful peace